I'm Gina Bell, and I'm a storyteller. This is Jars of Arioch, Part 2, Chapter 4, Hopeless Joy. We stood watching the murder fly away until we couldn't see any birds at all. We walked back up to my apartment, sniffling and crying the whole way. When we got to my floor, Hope froze. I almost tripped over her. I reached for the knob, and Hope came flying from behind me. She threw her body against the door so hard, the door slammed shut. It was almost 4 a.m., and I have neighbors. Her growling was escalating, and I knew the real barks were about to begin. Hope did not want us going into the apartment. "Hope!" I grabbed her muzzle and held her to me. The extremely loud sound of breaking glass was next. I could imagine all my neighbors calling the police at once. "My gun is inside," exclaimed Benoit. Benoit needed her pacifier. I gave her a quizzical look and tilted my head.
"That thing won't do you no good, you idiot."
Crow's words echoed in my hallway. Benoit opened the door, and the next thing I saw was her feet. She had slipped on the blood that was all over the plastic. I tried to go inside and slip myself. Poor Hope looked like she was walking on ice. I quickly began videotaping everything. Black feathers were sticking to the blood all over the apartment. One of my glass windows had shattered. Broken glass was everywhere. I hate the smell of blood. I never get used to it. Benoit crawled her way to the bedroom where she had 2 boxes of hefty bags. "We have to assume the police will be here soon," Benoit said to me. We feverishly began putting the plastic on the floor into 5-gallon black bags. As I looked up, I could see all his symbols. When I was in his realm, I could read Enochian, but not in my world. I saw that some that looked familiar. I knew one was a symbol for a crow. "I can't believe the cops aren't here yet. What time is it?" Benoit asked. I looked at the clock in my kitchen. "It's 3:30. Wait, no, the clock is wrong." I looked down at my phone, and it was a little after 4:30 in the morning. We got the place cleaned up in record time, all the while thinking the police would be at my door. I finally began to slow down after 2 hours of pulling and shoving bloody plastic into bags. I gave Hope a bath, and we each took showers. All the clocks in the apartment were wrong, and the cops never came. Finally, we sat down to begin translating. Enochian doesn't follow our English rules. It doesn't read from right to left. It can even go up and down. It's like trying to do a crossword puzzle with no questions. "The fog in my dream, I felt blind," I said to Benoit. "Nanny was especially important to me for so many reasons. Now she's gone, and I am blind. She was like having an invisible drone anywhere in the world, Benoit. That's all gone now. Her loss will make my job much more difficult. Plus, I'm really going to miss her." I fought back the tears and battled a bit with the frog in my throat. After hours of research, we were both still very confused. There were Enochian symbols for crows all over everything. "I think this is Arioch's way of telling me that he knows about Nanny's death," I said to Benoit. "When I saw him in the alley, time seemed to slow down. Arioch and his bendable time. I think he took me to her so we could say goodbye. Of course, it's all hypothetical. It might have just been a dream. These symbols, they're very strange. Look at this, Benoit. Eggs, sugar, and mace? What the hell is black strap mace? This has to be wrong. And these here, they're numbers. What the fuck?
Let me see.
Benoit moved closer to the piece I was working on. She pulled out her phone and began typing it into Google.
Tracy, it's a fucking cookie recipe. They're called murder cookies. And some chick that came up with this recipe, this article says one day a Reddit user shared that they were researching a murder that took place in their house. And during their research, they discovered a recipe for Scotch cookies. Apparently, their old neighbor owned a bakery, and this recipe for their Scotch cookies, it was the recipe of the year. But because the cookie recipe was uncovered due to a murder, Redditors started calling them murder cookies. The name has stuck ever since. I'm going to go and get everything I need for this recipe, and we're going to bake us some murder cookies.
Okay. Now, I don't see how any of this makes any sense. Arioch sent me a recipe for cookies. I ask him where my brother is, and I get cookies. This is all it's just weird.
Oh, this is weird. After everything we've seen and been through, it's the cookie recipe you can't get over?
I had to chuckle at this. It felt good to laugh. Okay, you go get your cookie stuff, and I'll keep translating. Maybe some coupons or decorating tips will pop up. After Benoit left, I called Raven to talk to her about Nanny and my dream.
My mother always felt immortal to me, Raven said. She was everything to my family. Now, did she say anything to you in her dream, baby?
She said, I am the murder now. I told Raven about the blackbirds and how they all flew away at once. I want to pay for her final expenses, Raven.
Dugas beat you to it, love. He's already paid for everything. We all miss you. Will you be here in January still?
Maybe. I have something I have to take care of here first. Now that Nanny's gone, it might take a lot longer.
Well, you remember, baby, my mother went through space and time to get that message to you. I'm thinking there's a reason for that. Keep your eyes to the skies, Tracy. If she is the murder now, maybe she can still help.
After Benoit came back, she got to work making murder cookies. As I sat staring at drippy blood and Enochian symbols, she made cookies. It wasn't until they were in the oven and the aroma began to circulate in my olfactory senses that I began to understand. The smell of these cookies was surprisingly similar to the flavor I had tasted in the purple hue of my doctor. She brought me out a plate with a glass of milk and set them down in front of me. I put the flat cinnamon-colored cookie into my mouth, and it was the exact same flavor. This is it! This is the flavor I tasted when I felt the evil person or thing in Dr. Ernie's vision. It's not making me high, though.
And this is what you tasted.
What is he saying through all this? Benoit asked. I don't know.
Tracy, I know there is a lot more going on in that head of yours than I don't know. Remember when Nanny told you that you must begin to trust yourself? Tracy, I'm telling you myself, you must begin to trust yourself. For all our sake, please.
Well, I think he's saying that it's okay to enjoy my job. Maybe that's what I want it to mean.
Ugh, what am I gonna do with you?
I don't know if it's all the sugar or what, but Benoit, I'm so tired. Benoit's cell phone rang in the other room and she ran to grab it. After a short conversation, she ran back in and said that there had been another attack by the cowboy. She gave me the address, and I told her I would join her shortly. I wanted to mingle with the onlookers, and I certainly didn't want to show up with the FBI. The woman was alive, but had been hogtied all alone for several days. Her mother went to check on her, and that's how she was found. She had been near death by that time. Dehydration would have been her cause of death. The rape and beating she took would not have killed her. By the time we got to the scene, several news vans were there, and there was a large group of people standing around watching the chaos. Everyone had on masks. I didn't see anyone with a black ball cap. I let myself trance while the others moved around me. I saw lots of visions going by extremely fast. Blue, blue, and more blue. It was like weaving through an ocean of regret. I didn't feel anything meaningful at all. I saw Benoit with some other officers, and I walked to join them.
"Excuse me, gentlemen,"
she said in her Cajun accent while turning to me. "Did you get anything down there?" She motioned towards the spectators. "Nothing, but I want to go into the apartment. I need to feel it in there."
"Well, there's a lot of people in there processing the scene right now."
"Can you make them all leave? I don't want to pick up on something totally unrelated."
"Give me a minute."
Benoit walked back into the apartment. I lit a cigarette and continued looking around at the crowd. A single crow landed and walked up to me and Hope. It looked at me sideways. Hope tilted her head and slowly walked up to the bird. The bird flew away, and as I watched it go, I saw that several crows flew off with it. I watched in the direction they flew until I couldn't see them anymore. I heard Benoit yell my name. I walked to her as cops and members of the FBI walked past me. Each one took a long, good look at me as they walked by. I went under the yellow tape that was everywhere. Benoit and Hope waited for me at the door of the apartment. Benoit had given me a white plastic jumpsuit and booties for my feet. I put them on before going in.
"Most importantly, Tracy, don't touch anything."
The apartment was a mess. It smelled of human waste and dirty socks. Most of her furniture had been knocked over. Lamps and knickknacks were broken all over the floor. Most of her apartment had been decorated by IKEA. I could smell an odd, almost not there hint of cookies baking. This woman is a baker, and she's passionate about it. There are traces of her essence still in the house. These traces are spots. Spots that are already fading. I couldn't taste anything, but the smell of his rotten soul, it still lingered in the air. These four walls had been witness to a violent confrontation. I walked till I found a huge bunch of bunched up duct tape. It had blood all over it. There were also several items of trash left behind by the EMTs. This was where she had laid. I could feel her fear. When a tragedy has taken place, I can feel it. It's like a stain on the environment. You notice I say stain and not spot. There's a huge difference between a stain and a spot. Grape jelly on your carpet is a spot. Bleach on a red t-shirt is a stain. It is forever. I have a dramatic sensitivity to these stains and spots. For example, if I walk into a room where there's been a recent argument, I can feel it. A few days go by and it's usually gone. The passage of time has a way of cleaning the spot. The stain, it never goes away. I would hate to be the next person to move in here. I cannot prove this, but I believe we all can be affected by these permanent environmental stains. Ever hear someone say, this room or house, it's so depressing? Well, her fear stain was so strong that it had almost blocked out everything else. I couldn't feel him at all. I couldn't imagine how she must have felt, tied up here for days. What must have gone through her mind in the dark? I can feel her trying not to cry. Crying would plug up her sinuses and make breathing even more difficult. He knew this. I walked through the entire apartment and found the bathroom. I looked into the mirror and knew he had looked into it also. Finally, I could feel him. He must have cleaned himself up before he left. I knew I couldn't touch anything, but I wanted to so badly. I wanted to touch everything. I wanted to touch the towel on the ground more than anything else. But I resisted. It was evidence. There was what looked like a little plastic tent on the floor. The tent had a number on it. The number was 23. I imagined that towel would be referred to as Exhibit 23 in a courtroom someday. I stood and stared into the mirror and let my eyes lose focus. I felt myself beginning to trance. My fingers began to tingle and the heat followed behind the tingle. I could hear the attacker's voice, but couldn't quite make out what he was saying. He had a soft, almost soothing voice at first. I could hear the victim crying. Her voice sounded so weak at this point. She was out of breath and just kept repeating the words, "Please don't kill me," over and over again. I could feel her limp body. She had used all her strength trying to fend him off. There was nothing left at this point but her soft cries for mercy. This thing has no mercy. I was beginning to really feel him now. He lets them live just for these final moments with them. He wanted to hear her beg for her life. I felt how powerful she made him feel. I couldn't see his color or taste his flavor, but I knew, somehow, I just knew it would be amazing. This one was more animal than man. He was a true predator. He lives for dominance. It was at this point I really began to realize just how fucked I was. I needed Nanny. I was now working blind. Trancing without touch has never produced anything for me. It's like swirls of dark gray that make a blank canvas waiting for touch. One of my fingers began to feel hot, and I tried to follow the heat. I made a move to my left and it got colder. Moving to my right, it got warmer, but not hot yet. I wanted to keep my eyes closed, but I was afraid I might step on or damage evidence. It was taking all my concentration to keep the trance going while still watching my step. The closer I got to her purse, the hotter my hand became. I hovered my hand over the purse as long as I could. I held it there until I couldn't stand the heat anymore. I yelled for Benoit and she stuck her body in as much as she could while holding onto Hope's leash. "Just tell her to stay," I yelled back. "Stay, Hope? Huh? Well, look at that. I really want one of these dogs. Do you feel anything, Tracy?" "There's something in her purse. I'm being really drawn to it." I had on a plastic glove Benoit had given me before I walked in. I slowly put my hand into the purse until I felt something burn my finger. I pulled my hand out quickly. "Fuck! It's the keys! I yelled to Benoit. I took the glove off and inspected my finger. It was red hot and inflamed.
Okay, let's get out of here and let them finish their job.
I'm gonna need a cold soda to hold on to for a while.
Oh, your poor finger.
We both inspected the new Enochian symbol created by the burn. This one really hurt. It wasn't like the others. This one had burned through the glove and several layers of skin. I couldn't tell what it was yet. Like an oasis in the desert, I noticed a vending machine in the breezeway of our victim's complex.
Well, thank God for that,
Benoit said as she rifled through the bag she always carried and pulled out some change for the machine. The moment I grabbed onto the coke, I felt the burning subside.
Now tell me everything,
Benoit barked at me.
Every feeling, no matter how small.
Well, I know the victim is a baker. She's sweet and maternal, but has no children. I don't think she has a lover or anything. This woman already felt isolated in life. This will make it much worse for her. Mostly what I felt there was her fear. He tortured her and she begged him not to kill her. He gets off on that. The conversations with him began with an incredibly soft and oddly gentle voice. He promises not to hurt them. The violence escalates over time. He breaks all the promises he makes one by one. The only reason he leaves them alive is because he enjoys thinking about them there in the dark. Also, I think he continues to watch the scene. I think he comes and goes from the victims as much as he can. He stands in a corner and he just watches them. He occasionally lets them know there might be someone in the room, a little touch or a feather to the nose. I can see a feather in his hand as I say this. I saw her worst action also. It's sad, and I really don't want to repeat it. That woman lying in that hospital bed is an incredibly kind person. I need to find this asshole. Hopefully before you do. One jar and it's over.
You got all that from walking around for 10 minutes?
Yes.
Huh. Her mother told me she's a cooking student. She's saving up to buy her own little bakery. The keys, I don't understand.
Well, me neither. But I know they're somehow a big part of this. That's the worst burn I've gotten. It means something big. I can't tell what this new symbol will look like yet. It's too red and swollen for me to make it out. When you go see her, make sure you take the keys.
We are going to see her right now.
Excuse me? I asked.
We will be going to see her. Let's go.
I had not been in a hospital in a long time. Not since I went to talk to the LAPD and identify my brother's body. I left Hope in the police car when we arrived. The officer promised he would sit with her for me. The smell of alcohol and plastic hit me in the face. It brought back all the feelings of that day. COVID kept the place on lockdown, but we were allowed in. I remember everything so clearly from that day. I could tell the second I walked in the hospital experiences would be extremely different experiences for me now. I could feel all the spots and the stains hitting me from all over. A hospital is a place filled with extreme emotions. Pain, worry, grief, fear. I was getting hit with all of it. I put down my head and closed my eyes. "You okay, Tracy?" Benoit asked. "Yeah, just a lot of emotions here, and I can feel them all as I walk through, but I'm okay." We found the victim's room. Benoit knocked softly on her door. The woman in the bed was covered in gauze. She had tubes coming out of her body and a catheter bag. She was sitting up slightly. Her face was swollen. She had 2 black eyes. They had wired her jaw shut. You could see the abrasions all over her hands from where the duct tape had been. An older woman sat beside her holding her hand. There was a man sitting on the other side of her with his back to us. As he turned, I realized I knew him. Benoit did a double take and stuck out her hand for Dr. Ernie. He stood up and I saw his eyes light up as he looked at Benoit. They spoke briefly before Benoit turned to me.
Tracy, this is Dr. Rommel. He's a patient advocate the hospital employs to help with trauma of this magnitude.
Dr. Ernie looked at me briefly before dismissing me completely and turning his focus back to Benoit.
It's nice to meet you.
The doctor nodded at me but barely looked at me. Invisible again. I watched the way he looked at Benoit. I knew that look. He was attracted to her. I felt a bit jealous. Not jealous of the doctor, but jealous of Benoit for being born in that beautiful skin. I doubt she might even know or be able to understand how different her experience of the world is as a beautiful woman. She must think that men are just nice guys. I rolled my eyes. I watched his body language with her. They were the same as they had been when I met him the first time. Dr. Ernie informed us we would not be able to talk to her today, that she was too drugged to communicate. I walked away from them. Neither one noticed. The woman sitting beside our victim stood and stretched. She leaned in and said something to the sleeping patient and then walked out. I walked in without anyone noticing and sat beside her. I held her hand and a vision began. Swirling colors. It was like seeing every color all at once swirling around me but never mixing. Each color was on its own. I felt the quivering of my lip. Deep blue swirled around me. We were somewhere with dogs. This was her worst action. I had seen it in her apartment, briefly. Now I was seeing it again, but this time up close and in slow motion. I could hear the barking off in the distance. A sign for animal control was on the wall. She stood at the back of the line with several others. Another woman walked in with a box. I felt her curiosity growing. She wanted to know what was in that box. The look on the woman holding it looked so sad. She opened the top, and I could see 5 tiny balls of fluff with big blue eyes looking up at us with hope. 5 itty-bitty kittens mewed from the box. The woman was surrendering all 5 feral kittens she had found. I felt a sudden burst of excitement from my victim. She had gone down there hoping to adopt a kitten. She wanted to take all 5 of these kittens home. The swirling of blue swirled fast and time moved forward slightly. We were now at the front of the line. I watched our sweet victim's face as the animal control officer said it was too late. I watched as my victim yelled at the woman. She was furious, but mostly angry with herself for not just grabbing the box and walking out with them. They had already put the kittens to sleep. She is a baker and an extreme animal lover. She is truly kind and good. It's rare I get to spend this much time with such a sweet soul. My mind filled with pure joy. She was like joy walking. Then the fucking flavor came and I began to gag. She tasted like I might imagine shit would taste. It was putrid. I was gagging so hard Benoit heard me and ran in to help me. I threw up my breakfast all over the floor. It just kept coming. I could feel Benoit trying to help me to the bathroom, but I was still in the blue. This woman dreams of those kittens almost every night. Those 5 kitten souls haunt her deeply. I started to cry and puke all at once. I felt someone slap me hard and the blue disappeared in a flash. I opened my eyes and saw Benoit's face in front of me.
Oh, it's very common. This can be hard for some people to look at,
Dr. Ernie said from the background. He sounded almost concerned. Even the way he was trying to be compassionate towards me was obviously for Benoit's benefit. I threw up a few more times and then washed my face and rinsed out my mouth.
You okay?
Dr. Ernie asked as I walked out of the bathroom. I just looked up at him and scowled. Benoit said her goodbyes to the good doctor. What's the victim's first name? I asked Benoit.
Her name is Joy.
As we were walking out, I noticed a bunch of commotion in the parking lot. Something was going on outside. I saw a bunch of cops running up the street as fast as they could.
Oh, what in the hell is going on now?
Benoit asked while running outside. I followed behind to find the squad car we came in. My heart fell into my stomach. The door to the police car was open and the cop was gone. I ran to the car as fast as I could. And Hope, she was gone.
She just took off,
I heard one of the cops yell. Benoit and the cop I had left in charge of Hope came running back to me.
There are still 2 cops out there looking for her, Tracy.
My mouth went dry, and my body began to feel heavy. The last thing I remember is hearing a woman screaming for Hope. She screamed at the top of her lungs, over and over again off in the distance. I would find out later that someone screaming, that someone was me.